Hello, and welcome to episode 6, all about chapters 7 and 8 of Fellowship of the Ring, being the 6th part of That's What I'm Tolkien About. Hello, I am Mary Clay. If that's too complicated for you, just call me MC. I'm over it at this point. And today I'm joined by one of my dear friends, Neal Metcalf. Welcome, Neal.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Yes.
I'm real excited to get into this.
I'm very excited. Listeners, y'all are in for a great treat. I'll have to post a screenshot of the paragraph long messages you sent me. Let me frame the context. I texted him, what are your non-spoiler thoughts about Tom Bombadil? And then got 20 paragraphs.
Yeah,
and
it was 3 or 4 separate texts, but each one were almost to the max. I had to send it, otherwise iPhone was going to start cutting it off.
Yeah, and then I was like, okay, he has to come on so he can talk about this.
Yeah.
Because I was trying to decide, I know that Tom Bombadil is a huge, part of the lore.
Uh-huh.
And so I was like, I need to have someone on who, really is into Lord of the Rings. And my friend Neal Metcalf here is into Lord of the Rings, to say the least.
Yeah, I love Lord of the Rings. I actually discovered The Hobbit, in the way that you love Harry Potter. I discovered The Hobbit before Harry Potter, actually. I read The Hobbit, and I, really loved it, and just loved the way he tells the story. And then I just had to move to the next ones. I think it's just kind of funny, because I, remember really vaguely being these movies look creepy, what is this? And then growing up, having read the book and being okay, great, well now I need to devour everything I can about it.
Nice. Yeah. Let's jump into chapter 7 in the House of Tom Bombadil. So, yes, we find our Hobbit gang in the helpful hands, I think helpful hands of Tom Bombadil, and they are
helpful for now, let's say.
Yeah, helpful for now, and which I have thoughts on in a second. And they arrive at his house and meet, it says, her long hair rippled down her shoulders. Her gown was green as young reeds, shot with silver like beads of dew, and her belt was gold, shaped like a chain of flag lilies, set with the pale blue eyes of forget-me-nots. About her feet, in wide vessels of green and brown earthenware, white water lilies were floating, so that she seemed to be enthroned in the midst of a pool. And that is the entrance of Goldberry.
Yep.
Who I have just written down as quite a character.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly the thing that got me is when she introduces herself as I am Goldberry, daughter of the river. And I was immediately she would be an anti-vaxxer.
Yeah. Yeah. Goldberry drinks a lot of boba tea and kale and everything.
Yes.
Kale is literally in everything.
Yes, and she talks about, it might be on the next page. Yes, and she later says, the trees and the grasses and all things growing or living in the land belong to each other. Tom Bombadil is the master. No one has ever caught old Tom walking in the forest, wading in the water, leaping on the hilltops, under light and shadow. He has no fear. Tom Bombadil is master. Interesting, but
right?
I just felt super, I don't know, are you supposed to feel uncomfortable with these two? Because I felt uncomfortable.
I really think so. I mean, even in his introduction in the Old Forest and the way that he, comes in the chapter before this one, he floats in, I don't know, seems like this normal dude at first, kind of, but he's singing a lot. And then you meet his wife. Singing. You meet his wife, who's just I pictured in my head the types of relationships where the guy is kind of a neckbeard almost in a way, and then he has the most perfect, beautiful girlfriend, and it's just every man's
like a Jerry situation on Parks and Rec.
Yes, that's almost how I picture it, and it's so off-putting. And in case you didn't get it when he beat you over the head, she really likes yellow.
Yes.
Everything is yellow.
Yellow
everything
and
is
green.
Yellow.
Everything is yellow and green, and everything is made, he makes a point to point out when, these baskets were earthenware, which I don't think I've ever heard that word used before, but I'm assuming it just means like they're clay, they're clay bowls basically. But so I put my next note is I also refer to her as Goldie in my notes. I kept wanting to call her Goldenberry. I don't know why.
I do the same thing. Instead of Goldberry, I always want to call her Goldenberry.
Yeah, Goldberry. So coming from my Harry Potter context, is she like a Vila or something, or an elf? Because she seems to have this entrancing effect on the hobbits, and Frodo all of a sudden starts singing and doesn't even realize he's singing until he stops and is like, whoa, why? I didn't even mean to sing. Why did that happen?
Yeah, it just kind of comes out of him.
And he has like, I think at the beginning of the next chapter or the end of this one, at one point they like turn around so Frodo can go back and say goodbye to her. So like he has a huge crush on her immediately.
Immediately falls in love with her. I think, so the thing is, you don't know. Goldberry and Tom Bombadil don't really come back.
Good.
And so this is like
I can't deal with them.
It's driven a lot of people mad, like within the community. Like I have read before literary criticisms and like articles on Lord of the Rings because it's like this huge masterpiece. People are like heavily debate who Tom Bombadil is and like what's his deal. And I was listening to some of the earlier episodes today, and I can't remember who it was, but y'all were talking about how like there's basically no original content anymore.
Yeah.
And then talking about like Tolkien having created fantasy. Well, Lord of the Rings is inspired / based on Beowulf, so like there's literally no original content anymore.
Yeah. Beowulf is the origin, I guess, of everything.
And so people consider Beowulf to be like one of the first fantasy stories, but the genre wasn't really created until like Tolkien laid that down. But he was heavily inspired by Norse and Greek Roman mythology, and so I think you're supposed to get the sense that she's like a naiad, like the water nymphs, or like.
They feel very like other earthly or whatever.
Very much so.
It kind of feels like she's, I don't know, this like they're like the god and goddess of the forest or the trees and the river and stuff. Yeah,
they have a very ethereal presence.
That's it. That's the word. Yeah, and she
has a very siren.
That's it. Yeah, she's like a siren.
Yeah, because she sings too, just as much as he does, and it like. And you talk about, I think, some of the times the tongue-in-cheek way Tolkien writes things, but she sings them these songs, and then he'll say, like, as if under an enchantment.
Yeah.
Like, we know.
Like, it is an enchantment.
We know this is what you mean. Like.
Yeah. And then Frodo is me and says, tell me, if my asking does not seem foolish, who is Tom Bombadil? Which is, I think, one of the first times I've been like, that's it, Frodo.
Yeah, Frodo.
You're doing the right thing here. And she just responds with, he is, at first.
Yeah.
And then Frodo gives her a look, and she just says, he is the master of wood, water, and hill. Which, again, is a way, what I found with this chapter is that Tolkien does an excellent job of pretending like he's answered everything by actually answering nothing at all.
Because we're not told it from, like, Frodo's, like, first-person point of view. It's this sort of limited third person.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it feels like the narrator who's supposed to be telling us what Frodo's experiencing is unreliable.
Oh, a hundo P.
1 hundo.
As the youth say. Yeah, it is a limited third person because the narrator can't give away what we don't know yet because Frodo doesn't know yet. Or the hobbits don't know yet. I don't know, it's just an interesting writing device of like, I'm going to create this ethereal, otherworldly concept that is impossible to describe by talking about it in such a nonsensical way or just brushing it off or something. Kind of like how, I don't know, I just kind of think of how like in the 5th Harry Potter book, J.K. Rowling destroyed all the time turners so she wouldn't have to deal with the time turners anymore.
Okay, but jumping back for a second, because you said that, you read that little quote about who is Tom Bombadil, and Goldberry replies he is, feels such like a reference to the scene in Exodus. I think it's like Exodus, I wrote down. Exodus 3:14, when...
Y'all, Neal is like a literature scholar, basically.
Well, no. Well, I'm... Unofficially. Working on that English degree. But yeah, so Exodus 3:14, Moses comes finds the burning bush and hears the voice of God speaking to him. And Moses asks him, "Who are you?" And God replies, like through the bush, says, "I am that I am." I don't know, the fact that who is Tom Bombadil?
That's okay. His name is nonsense.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
I keep wanting to call him Tom Beetle the Bard.
He's such an enigma and lives in this sort of like otherworldly space.
Yes.
This separate, like even separate and more disconnected than like the Shire is. And her reply is just like, he is.
He is, yeah.
He is because he is.
Yeah, and by the way, Neal's response to my like original text message of what are your thoughts on Tom Bombadil? He goes, he is an enigma. And at first I was just kind of like, oh, haha, that's so funny. And then reading this chapter, I was like, he is an enigma. By the way, I cannot think of that word without also immediately thinking of the SpongeBob quote of Patrick holding the box and he goes, the inner mechanisms of my mind are an enigma. So that's what, listeners, that's what was going through my head for most of this chapter. So,
oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I forgot one thing that I wanted to jump back to right at the beginning when they describe Goldberry, and she's wearing, her belt was of gold shaped like a chain of flag lilies set with pale blue eyes of forget-me-nots. So many times colors and like flowers in literature, if the author took the time to write them down, they probably mean something.
Yeah.
And like the flag lilies aren't really like a specific flower, but they're lilies that are like arranged on like multiple on a stem, on a stalk. But it's like, so these flowers are symbols of regality and royalty, while also the forget-me-nots are of youth and like remembrance.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, I especially, she's got such a regal nature, but they seem to be almost keepers of the forest. Yeah.
No, thank you also for like going into detail about that, because there are a couple points in this chapter and honestly throughout the whole book where like Tolkien he'll like describe something so specifically with like, for example, that where he names specific flowers. And I'm like, I'm sure that has a deeper significance, but I just don't want to look it up right now.
Just don't want to engage that far.
I'm like, you know what? I'm fine with reading it and it's just like beautiful, pretty poetry.
Yeah.
Then they all sit down to dinner, and this is where I think, I don't know how, if at all, this part or these characters or whatever were adapted in the movie. From the very little I remember from the first movie, I don't think he's in it at all.
No, he's not.
Yeah. But if it was in it, this is one of those things where I feel like someone could go in and re-edit it and it would look like a trailer for the next Jordan Peele movie. Because it feels very much like, I don't know, it just feels like Get Out or something, where there are these people, these friends walking in the forest, and this strange old man is like, oh, I'll take you in and help you. And then they go inside and his like kind of eccentric wife. She's a little bit off, but she seems nice and normal and welcoming. And then they treat them to a feast. And then this is where it just kind of got creepy. They drink water, but apparently they make a note that it looks like normal water and it tastes like normal water, but it has some kind of intoxicating effect because soon they're like singing and basically just acting drunk. So this is the point in the horror movie where like they accidentally get drugged and then like, I don't know, overnight Tom Bombadil and Goldberry like steal like beds, steal and then they wake up
in the basement.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, they like, I don't know, steal their souls or something. Something
horrible.
Yeah, I don't know, but kind of the reverse of that video where someone edited Half-Blood Prince to be a teen rom-com. I feel like this could be the reverse of that, where like this could easily be a horror movie in a different context.
Oh, like The Scary Mary, where somebody took the trailer for Mary Poppins and turned it into a horror film.
Oh, I have not seen that. Yeah. I need to see that.
This 100%, if you just like took this chapter right on out and then just had it end. Actually, you could have it probably continue into the next chapter too, because that gets a little freaky.
Yeah.
And then have instead of him like rescuing them, he controls them. Who knows?
Yeah.
Like
exactly.
It definitely has that feel to it.
You heard it here first, folks. We're making the next horror movie based off of Tom Bombadil.
2 chapters from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. We'll expand about that'll be the foundation. My next note is, and I thought the Hobbit sang a lot, because boy howdy, is there a lot of singing. It's like, basically like Les Mis, at least Tom Bombadil is, and how like he just kind of sings his thoughts sometimes, or like sings his stories. I feel like I would just be like, I'm out of here. I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
I'm going to go back into the forest.
I'd rather go and get eaten by that tree. Bye.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of Tolkien really liked poems.
Yeah.
Like, clearly. Really like poems.
Clearly, the linguist.
And Tom Bombadil, like, as a character, originated out of, again, stories he was telling to his children, and then wrote, like, these, like, nonsensical poems for them. These almost, like, nursery rhyme poems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he seems kind of, or Tom Bombadil at least, seems kind of, like, Seussian, like Dr. Seuss.
Definitely has that feel to it.
Or, like, if Dr. Seuss, Dr. Seuss wrote songs or something.
But they always have, something happens after he sings. Like, almost always there's a cause and effect that's, like, not quite explainable. You know, singing to Old Man Willow in the chapter before and having him spit them all out.
Yeah.
Like, singing to them when they first meets them and suddenly their hearts feel, like, lifted. And so, originally having come from those poems, and there's a little bit more explored in, like, a collection of poems called The Adventures of Tom Bombadil, which is kind of, like, touches on his life a little more. And a lot of it deals with, like, his voice. Like, there's a lot of focus on his voice containing the waters and hills. And, like, saying, as Goldberry talks about grass and tree and hill and all those things. And, like, he can use it to talk to animals and, like, literally control the flow of a river.
Yeah, and he mentions, I don't remember if it's now or later on, but at some point he mentions that, like, old Tom Bombadil was around when the first acorn was grown and blah, blah, and I guess basically is the implication that he is immortal and has been here to see everything, like, grow and die and everything in the forest.
Yeah, exactly. Which is a very, 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 very long time. Middle Earth has been around.
I was gonna say,
for a very long
when
time.
we get to the forest, it's already called the Old Forest. So Tom Bombadil must be very old then.
And where the story takes place in, like, the Third Age.
So I've seen, like, some, I don't know, like, memes or something or jokes about the Second Age. Is that what, like, isn't described? Does The Hobbit take place during the First Age, or
The
is
Hobbit
this
takes
all...
place during the Third Age.
Oh, okay, so it's
Both
all
of them
during the
do.
Third... Oh, okay.
Because the Third Age is a span of, like, 3,000 years.
Oh, okay. Then.
Yeah. So this is happening very close to the end of the Third Age, because when the story of Lord of the Rings ends, like, supposedly the Fourth Age starts. That's all I'm going to say beyond that part.
Oh, boy.
Like, that year is, like, 3,000 something of the Third Age. And so each one is, if we think about them that long, like, this world has been around for at least, like, 9,000 years.
Yeah.
And that was when it was, like, as Middle Earth before, like, when people started, like, let's start documenting the years.
Yeah.
So, and the Silmarillion deals with all of that. But the Silmarillion reads like the King James Bible. And if you thought there were a lot of characters,
I was going to say, it's funny you say that because someone else said it reads like a Bible.
Yeah.
So
it's very much
like I'm sure to Tolkien
the Middle Earth Bible
was his Bible. Yeah. He was like, this is it.
Yeah,
this is it. This is it, Chief.
It goes from the very beginning of, like, creation to
oh my gosh, that just feels unnecessary.
Yeah.
Like, do I need to know all of that in order to here's how I feel about, like, a lot of these, not just the Silmarillion, there we go, not just that, but, like, also every now and then in a chapter there will be, like, a random side note of, like, 3 paragraphs worth of, like, a history lesson about the land, and sometimes I'm like, do I really need to know this? Does this add to the plot? Does this add to the characters? Does this add to the story? And, like, one time I was like, oh, yeah, that was kind of a funny thing he said about the Bucklanders. And, like, I'm glad I read that. But, like, I could have read the story just fine without it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's where a lot of people get bogged down when it comes to the Lord of the Rings. Because I've run into people who have, like, never tried it. I've run into people who said that they loved The Hobbit and then tried to give Lord of the Rings a try, and it was too much. And, like, they're vastly different styles. And I think a study, like, a scholar of history and a scholar of language that he was, like, no stone left unturned when he was making this world. And also, Tolkien wrote this whole thing as not, like, he was writing it as if it was not an alternate universe, but an alternate history of, like, Europe. And so he just wanted to explore everything. I mean, he made 14 potentially learnable languages.
He made them?
Like, created them as a linguist. And the two that are most known are, like, the most thought out. But he made 14 potentially learnable languages for Lord of the Rings.
That's just so much.
And there's
That's
so much
like-
more than just, like, it's overwhelming, to be
Yeah.
honest. Because there's so much more than just this. Because the
Yeah.
Silmarillion continues, there is 2 volumes of the Lost Tales.
Yeah.
And then I'm pretty sure
It's
it's
sort of-
like 4 or 5 volumes called The Annals of Middle-earth. Or Annals of Arya, because that's what the planet is called.
Oh, okay.
And it's like a 6-volume
Oh my god.
book.
Listeners,
It's like
I don't know if I'm
literally
going to do all that.
an encyclopedia. Yeah,
I don't think that would be exciting. And
I don't think anyone would have fun.
I don't think I could like convince anyone to read any of that so that they could come on and guess, which would mean it would be just me by myself talking about it. Yeah, that's a lot. I don't know.
No, you don't have to go that far. I've never even gone that far beyond it. I only have just read a good section of the Silmarillion and some of the Lost Tales. But I've reread Lord of the Rings countless times. It's so dense. If this is dense, then the actual textbooks that he wrote for it are...
Yeah. And like I see how people are like, I couldn't get into Lord of the Rings, like the books. It's because we're on page, I don't know, 100, we're on page 120.
Yeah, like 130 or something-ish.
And like it's just so slow moving.
In the Shire.
Yeah, it's still the Shire, and like they stop. So continuing on.
But long story short of what all I was saying, Tom Bombadil, if what he claims is true, is very, very old.
Yes, he is very, very old. So the hobbits go to bed and they have this, or at least 3 out of 4 of them have like a weird, I don't know, collective nightmare or something. And I was like, at first I was like, oh my gosh, you're going to be able to like, it's going to represent the 4, it's going to represent the 4 elements. And then you're going to, I don't know, piece them together. And then it's going to create the plot of what happens next. Frodo has a dream about a vast tower not made by hands. On its top stood the figure of a man, which I wrote down, it better be Gandalf. That man better be Gandalf because he's done nothing. So he should at least be able to do something in Frodo's dreams. And then I'm pretty sure it is Gandalf because the next sentence is the moon glistened as it rose, seemed to, wait, that's not, the moon, oh my gosh, I can't read. The moon as it rose, that's it. Yeah. The moon as it rose seemed to hang for a moment above his head and glistened in his white hair as the wind stirred it. And then it says, the figure lifted his arms and a light flashed from the staff that he wielded. A mighty eagle swept down and bore him away. And I know that there is, I think, some gif or something of Gandalf flying on an eagle or something. So I'm pretty sure that's Gandalf, which is fine by me because I'm just like, Gandalf, show up, do something. keep these hobbits moving. I was gonna say, you at any point during this, I plead the 5th. Yeah, you can plead the 5th.
Yeah, 100%.
To anything I say, if you think any response at all would be a spoiler. And then Pippin has a kind of a nightmare and then remembers the comforting words that Tom Bombadil or Goldie Berry, whatever her name is, said. And then Mary also has some kind of a nightmare.
Where he like starts to drown.
Yeah, which is terrifying.
Really scary.
And then it just says, Sam slept through the night in deep content if logs are content. Yeah, that's it. Neal can read. So
it's such a funny way to just say Sam slept like a log.
Yeah, it's like, okay, Tolkien, we get it. You're trying to be fancy here. So there goes my theory. But I was like, it's going to represent their nightmares are going to represent the 4 elements and blah. So Sam doesn't have a dream or doesn't have a nightmare at least. So
I do think they represent.
That's got to represent something.
And I mean,
I'm also sure that these are intense foreshadowing. All of these dreams that they're having are a lot of foreshadowing, which you don't have to comment on. Neal is just nodding his head.
Yeah.
Which is basically,
yes.
Yeah.
I plead the 5th.
Yeah.
I'm saying yes, sure, not commenting.
Yeah, it's foreshadowing.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's foreshadowing.
We can talk about it. I don't know if you ever want to go back and be like, now I realize these things having read it.
Yeah.
But I want to know what your thoughts are on these dreams and the way that he talks about them after having experienced more of the book.
Yeah.
Because I think once you know them more, it'll be indicative of their characters.
Yeah.
I wonder what they tell of their characters post-reading.
Yeah.
Because I already know. But
Yeah. And Yeah, I'm interested to see what it means or what is like revealed about Sam later on.
Mm-hmm.
That like I can go back and be like, oh, that makes sense for why he didn't have a dream. Which part of me thinks, oh, it's because he dies. But I'm assuming that doesn't happen because everyone under the earth has been like, Sam is the real hero here. So I can't imagine he dies, and I also don't feel like Tolkien would kill off a supposedly beloved character, but who knows? Anything is game.
Anything is possible.
He killed Lupin and Tonks at the same time. You can kill Sam off. So.
Yeah, I mean, if you could kill them without even giving them a death scene, you can do whatever you want, I guess.
Don't even. So they wake up, and this is another moment where I'm like, I'm sure there's symbolism here, because Tolkien makes a point to say that Frodo looks out like the eastern window, and Pippin looks out the western window or something. I'm like, I'm sure these mean lots of things. I just can't be bothered at the moment.
Yeah.
Which I know makes it sound like I don't care about reading this right now, but it was just like, I'm sure these have deeper meanings, but I'm also afraid to Google anything because I'm afraid it's going to spoil something.
Things.
Like, I'm afraid it'll be like, well, typically when the East and West are represented together in a book, specifically talking about windows, is talking about the rise. I mean, I'm sure it has something to do with like sunset and sunrise. But, like, I'm afraid I would be able to piece together something that, like, oh, this means Frodo's going to die, and Pippin is going to be the one to save him, or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I will say is just that theme of East and West is very pervasive through the three of them. Interested to see what you do with that information, and that you picked up on a part that, like, I don't know.
There's all these words in this book, and if Tolkien, like, specifically mentions what direction something is, like, a window is facing, I'm like, that's got to be important.
Especially if you contextualize that this book was written on, like, hand notes and a typewriter.
Oh, gosh.
Right?
I didn't
hand
even...
notes and a typewriter.
My hand cramps just writing my notes for each chapter.
Yeah.
I can't imagine.
Right?
Gosh, that's awful.
So the letters and the words that he picked are intentional.
Yeah, they're
because
very intentional.
He's writing by hand and then having to typewriter it.
Yeah.
And there was no delete, and there was no, like, copy and paste. And if you messed up a page, you just had to start over.
Oh, man. So this day that they wake up, it's pouring rain, and I just love how they're like, yeah, there are these evil people who are following us, but I mean, it's raining, so
rain day, guys, might as well chill.
Yeah, exactly. And that's all they do is they chill. And then I wrote down, okay, so Tom is like born from the forest or something if he can shield himself from the rain, because it describes him coming in from the rain, and it looks like it's some kind of invisible umbrella hovering above him, because he comes in and he's completely dry. And I'm just like, okay, he's born from Old Man Willow, the tree, like, is his father or something.
I thought was really funny when I was listening to some of your earlier episodes. You talked about how the trees, like, moving and stirring and waking up reminded you of Prince Caspian.
Yeah.
Because guess who was Tolkien's BF?
Yes, C.S. Lewis. Yeah.
So, like, there's a reason if you're ever reading Narnia or Tolkien and you're like, this feels like it's because the other one was like, oh, you should do this to your novel. And they were like, no, I don't like that critique. And then went and wrote their own novel. I
want to see the pitch of C.S. Lewis to Tolkien about, like, and then a lion comes in and saves everything.
Jesus. And Tolkien's like, I had you until that point. You had me until that point.
It's like, no.
But Lord of the Rings, just a little fun fact, it almost ruined their friendship.
Wasn't it? So, if I recall, I don't remember. Go on. I have vague memories of talking about, like, Tolkien, Lewis, fantasy, like, the genre and everything in, like, one of my, I had a film class as an elective at some point in college.
I think they were really good buddies, and they both, I think it was when they were both, like, at university and then became professors together, I want to say. So, listeners, if I'm wrong, you can just kill me, I guess.
Go ahead and at him.
Yeah, I guess just kill me. But, like, they became friends and then both started teaching, like, similar courses, and they both had very similar upbringings. They both had, like, grown up in the church, but they both responded to Christianity and religion differently.
Yeah, that's what I feel like I remember. Because wasn't it, like... Or C.S. Lewis, his was so rooted in, like, like the Bible and biblical characters and themes and everything. Yeah. And Tolkien didn't want his books to have any part of that.
Yeah, which he can say that. He can try and be like, this is not at all
Well, I mean,
Christianity, but like...
I feel like there are so many, like, literary themes or something that can be traced back to. Because, I mean, like, the Bible was one of the, like, first mass-produced, widespread books.
Yeah. Where were we? Oh, yes, yeah. So they both just they responded to Christianity differently, and Tolkien was just not feeling those Christian themes that are still in the book. And I mean, he kind of went, I want to say like
different separate ways or something in terms of his
and Lord
writing.
of the Rings kind of like especially Middle Earth, it kind of just consumed him, and not necessarily in like a bad way, but not also in a positive way. Sometimes because like that was all he was working on.
Yeah, I can't imagine like being his kid and being like, Dad, wanna go play ball? And it's like, I can't. I have to write in detail what this water nymph woman looks like.
Frodo is one time going to use a spoon, and if I don't tell the readers everything that happens to that spoon afterwards, well then, how will they understand that this world is real?
Yeah.
Can we please just go play ball? No, Frodo, it's never at the mountain yet. God, it's been 6 years.
Oh my God. That's another thing that we were talking about over text message is how much time passes in this, that in the movie, you're like, oh, this is over the course of like 1 week. Yeah. And this is over the course of many years. Like many decades. Between chapters 1 and 2, like 20 years passes, basically.
Yes.
And then
when Gandalf is like, after Bilbo leaves, and the movie makes you really honestly feel like it's 20 minutes. Like Gandalf is like, hey, Frodo buddy, I'm going to go check out some things. Be right back. And then like Ubers somewhere else and then like
asks about the ring.
Yeah, and then like comes back and he's like, hey bud, here I have all this information. Here you go.
Here's
That's like
evil
a
ring.
17-9-year 17-year process.
Yeah, and in the book it makes sense because so originally I was very confused about why Gandalf would leave Frodo the ring if he knew it was dangerous or evil or something. Like, why wouldn't he? Well, I guess we know he didn't want it with Bilbo because Bilbo was already a little bit consumed by it. Mm-hmm. But like, why would he leave it with Frodo? And it's because then in that 17-year gap between when he comes back in the next chapter, he's learning about the ring. Because he doesn't know anything. So yeah, in the movie... It probably just makes him look super reckless and irresponsible and clueless.
Yeah, it does. Because, like, 20 minutes, maybe, is, like... that scene ends, and he says the, like, keep it secret, keep it safe, and, like, flees. And then, new scene, like, Frodo walks back in, and Gandalf's like, hey, bud, sit down.
Let me tell you a fun story.
And it's not like... Frodo went from being considered a kid by Hobbit standards in that first chapter, and then like Gandalf comes back with darker information, and like Frodo's a man now. Like there's a change, I feel, that we'll never really know because there's that huge time skip. But I know definitively the events of The Hobbit takes like 13 months. That's the timeline that he says when Bilbo comes back, that he'd been gone for that long. I want to say all the events of Lord of the Rings, like just traveling, like as the Fellowship, not having those gap years. I have to say like 5 or so years.
Oh my gosh, this is the longest quest ever.
Yeah, but it's also like if you had to walk all the way across Europe. If you think about it like that.
I mean, yeah, I guess that makes sense. So they decide to take a rain day, and they're chilling.
Chill day.
Yeah, basically chill day, and Tom Bombadil like sings them songs and tells them tales.
Also, don't you think it's super creepy that like he's always there? And I don't mean that like it's his house, but they'll be getting ready for bed and he's just like sitting in a chair, not talking to them, just in the room with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then when they wake up, they always wake up to him. Yeah.
Once again, going back to my theory that this could be a horror movie.
Easily. It's
like the jump cut. I mean, the jump scare could be like Frodo is looking down the hall because he thinks he hears a noise, and then he's like, guess it was nothing, just the wind. And then he turns around, and then Tom Bombadil's there. It's like the Shia LaBeouf thing, actual human cannibal Shia LaBeouf thing. It's like there he is, lurking in the woods.
Exactly.
Tom Bombadil.
Tom Bombadillo. He's coming with a knife, and then it's just Tom Bombadil. Just like...
That's terrifying. And Tolkien then, like I said earlier, gets away with quote unquote explaining everything by explaining nothing at all. And basically has these paragraphs where he's like, and then Tom Bombadil talked about the trees and the flowers and the bees and the woods, and suddenly it all seemed to make sense to Frodo. And it's like the more he talked, the more Frodo understood. And I'm like, well, I understand nothing.
So that just ties right back into that unreliable aspect too. That
Maybe.
We're not privy to all of Frodo's thoughts and Frodo's learning, and like that has to be intentional. I feel.
Also, he probably just didn't want to write it on that typewriter, which I don't blame him. It's a lot of words.
That's a lot of work to do.
It is a lot of words. And this is when, so I had a theory in what?
Let me ask you how you feel before I dive into this topic, because it's based off something that Tom Bombadil says, and it doesn't spoil anything for Lord of the Rings, but it needs Silmarillion background to explain
I don't care
it. You
about
don't care?
That, no.
Okay, so you know how he has that paragraph where he says that when Frodo says, "Who are you, master?" he asked. What? Said Tom, sitting up and his eyes glinting in the gloom. Don't you know my name yet? That's the only answer. Tell me who you are, alone, yourself, and nameless. But you are young and I am old. Eldest, that's what I am. Mark my words, my friend. Tom was here before the river and the trees. Tom remembers the first raindrop and the first acorn. He made paths before the big people and saw the little people arriving. He was here before the kings and the graves and the Barrow-Wights. When the elves passed westward, Tom was already here before the seas were bent. He knew the dark under the stars when it was fearless, before the Dark Lord came from outside. And Dark Lord and outside are both capitalized outside. Which means that not only is Tom Bombadil old, he might arguably be the oldest sentient creature on Middle Earth. Because the Dark Lord that he's talking about here from the outside is not Sauron.
Oh.
It's Sauron's master.
Like original sin or something?
His name is Morgoth.
Okay.
Yeah, and he's Sauron's master. There was this one god who started creating things, and from those like thoughts, he was just thinking basically, and from those thoughts were like personified of his mind, and those were the 12 Valar or Einar. They're basically like the Greek Olympian and like the Pantheon. Together, all of them like performed back to him this great chorus, performed back to like the one creator. He loved it so much he used it to like materialize existence. That's the way that his in the beginning there was nothing, and then God said, "Let there be light." Like it was basically that's his story. And then there's one named originally Melkor who wanted to create in the way that the one god was creating, but he couldn't because he's only a piece of him. So he rebelled against him, and when he started making things, they were like corrupted and evil. So like he created the orc and like all those kinds of darkness. And then there are the Maiar, which are like angels, servants of these gods. And that's what Sauron was. He was one of the angels that was turned by
Man,
Morgoth.
I mean, talk about Tolkien. Definitely, this has a lot of biblical roots.
Yeah.
Because like Lucifer, the fallen angel, this has a lot of biblical roots. Whether or not he likes it.
Yeah, whether or not he likes it,
it's true.
It's basically there.
It's like,
and
come on,
that's
bro,
why I feel, because Tom Bombadil saying before the Dark Lord came from outside, he's talking about Morgoth. Like
the
coming
original,
down originally and being, because they created this world, it was beautiful, and then Morgoth entered it in materiality and started corrupting it. And so he's talking about when Morgoth came, brand new world, just like fresh and perfect.
And then
Tom Bombadil was there.
That's
before any of the other gods started creating anything.
That's pretty cool.
So
that's pretty cool. On the previous episode, as we're recording, it's the episode that came out today, but a week ago for you listeners, I had a theory, or not even a theory, it was just like I used it as a reference point, and it kind of turned out to be true. I compared the old forest to that swamp in the episode of Avatar: The Last Airbender, where they get lost, and then and then there are all these mirages, and it's really spooky and scary, and then they find out that all of the life in the swamp stems from this one tree. And that's essentially the old forest. And it says, it's talking about, great willow. And it says, his gray thirsty spirit drew power out of the earth and spread like fine root threads in the ground. and invisible twig fingers in the air, till it had, under its dominion, nearly all the trees of the forest from the hedge to the downs. So I was right!
Mm-hmm. But instead of it being like a semi-neutral guardian, like an Avatar, he wants to eat people.
Yeah, instead of it being like a, you must learn about the earth and the energy that flows through it. But it's like, no, this is the evil tree, and he's gonna eat you. Yeah, and all of his friends are going to eat you.
I do get it, because he has that line about how Tom's words laid bare the hearts of trees and their thoughts, which are often dark and strange and filled with the hatred of things that go free upon the earth, gnawing, biting, breaking, hacking, burning, destroyers and usurpers.
Yeah, which... Yeah, you can't. Yeah, as soon as he
fault Old Man Willow for not wanting
exactly. As soon as Tolkien explains it like that humans or other people or other things that have destroyed that are gnawing, biting, breaking. Like it sounds humans are the real monsters after all. Like on the Walking Dead, it's like we are the Walking Dead. Anyway, it's like you can't blame him because haven't treated the forest so good.
Yeah.
And then it goes into, so the titles of sometimes the titles of the chapters give away nothing at all, and that's what titles of chapters should do. But the title of the next chapter kind of gives away this part. Tom goes into a description of the Barrow-Downs, and basically it's this gross evil place, and later on he gives them like specific instructions on how to avoid it, but given the fact that the next chapter is called like In the Barrow-Downs, we know that they get there. So that was kind of like a spoiler. And so it's described as, let's see, a shadow came out of dark places far away, and the bones were stirred in the mounds. Barrow-wights walked in the hollow places with a clink of rings on cold fingers and gold chains in the wind. Stone rings grinned out of the ground like broken teeth in the moonlight. Ugh. And then the next words are the hobbits shuddered, which is, that's... Tolkien, he might spend forever describing just how much yellow Goldberry is wearing, but he also writes bone-chilling descriptions of really gross, evil stuff.
Yeah, he's really good at describing evil things, fell things, as you'll eventually have him just... That's a phrase he created, F-E-L-L things. More from that?
Yeah, more from the Bible that he claims to not know.
I know.
I feel like if someone were to present, like write an essay or a dissertation or something, writing about all the parallels between Lord of the Rings and the Bible, and they presented it to Tolkien, he would just do the Mariah Carey. Oh, I can't read. I suddenly can't read. So then they have dinner. And this is, once again, where I think there could be a big plot point in the Jordan Peele horror movie version. We come to find out that Tom Bombadil kind of was expecting them and knew this would happen and knows about the ring somehow. Or I guess Frodo starts telling him about the ring or something. And then he asks for it or asks to see it. And Frodo just hands it to him. Which, this is the point in the movie where it's like, oh, the reason they've been so nice and pleasant and welcoming is because they're trying to trick them into giving them the ring. And this is the point in the movie where, like, they use the ring and they become evil and then they eat the hobbit souls or whatever. And then they go take over the rest of the world.
Especially when it says... And Frodo, to his own astonishment, drew out the chain from his pocket and unfastened the ring at once to Tom. Yeah. Like... Not only did he take it out, he took it off of the chain. And then handed it to him. And then handed it to him. And it's interesting that no one has talked about the ring that we know of because, unreliable narrator, but that Tom Bombadil says, "Show me the precious ring." Yeah. Which, again... makes me feel like it just gives me very distrustful vibes. Like I think we're supposed to trust him, I suppose, but the fact that he calls it my precious, which is like one of the only there's like 3 quotes I know from the movies, and one of them is Gollum going, "My precious." And if we have this character calling it my precious also, that just doesn't bode well for me. The fact that you said, to Frodo's own astonishment, once again, like,
whatever enchanting, intoxicating, like they're having some kind of enchanting, intoxicating effect on the hobbits. And they're like singing and saying things and doing all the stuff that like normally they wouldn't do.
And just like wholly trusting them immediately.
Yeah.
Revealing information that like they were told by Gandalf, hey, don't tell people what your mission is.
Yeah.
Hey, random stranger in the forest, want this ring we're supposed to destroy?
Yeah, which is, it's funny, like, how Gandalf was like, don't tell anyone, and pretty much every single person they have come into contact with at least has some idea of what's going on. Like, even Farmer Maggot was like, I know you're in trouble, and I'm assuming it has something to do with part of Bilbo's treasure, which is not wrong.
Not wrong.
And like, it's not a good secret to have.
Yeah, and then he slips the ring on, and nothing happens. He puts the ring on, and nothing happens.
That's what's spooky. That's what's spooky.
They're like looking at him. He has the ring on his finger, and then all of a sudden they all realize he doesn't turn invisible.
Yeah,
it's just a normal ring.
He's just sitting there,
and he takes it off, flicks it in the air, and it disappears in the middle of the air.
Yeah.
Which they all freak out about because, like,
I mean,
great job, Frodo. You just gave this dude the ring and now he's sent it back to Sauron. And then he basically pulls that old dad quarter.
I was going to say, I wrote down, is Tom doing sleight of hand magic with the ring? Like, this is when I was like, I'm done.
It's in your nose, Frodo, the whole time.
Yeah, I'm so glad.
No, Tom, we saw you put it in the other hand.
My gosh.
Tom Bombadil being like, where's the ring?
Doing the thumb trick for you.
Yes, we'll tell you everything. That's the most amazing magic we've ever seen.
Yes. They're like babies when they do like, I got your nose. Where did it go?
Like they start crying. He's like, no. You have your nose.
We don't understand object permanence.
Oh, yeah. And then here's the part where Frodo kind of catches on to it, too. He says, Frodo looked at it closely this after Tom Bombadil passed it to him, and rather suspiciously, like one who had lent a trinket to a juggler. It was the same ring, or looked the same and weighed the same, for that ring always seemed to Frodo to weigh strangely heavy in the hand. But something prompted him to make sure. He was perhaps a trifle annoyed with Tom for seeming to make so light of what even Gandalf thought so perilously important.
Yes.
He waited for an opportunity when the talk was going on again, and Tom was telling an absurd story about badgers and their queer ways, which badgers are now gay allies.
Which, hang on, I need to insert here. Yes, we understand that the original context of queer is strange and weird and has nothing to do with the LGBT community. That being said, sometimes it's just funny to read it in that context.
Yeah.
Okay, so the
Badger
the
said gay rights. And so, and then Frodo slips on the ring, and to his delight, no one can see him. And so then he's like, I'm going to wear the ring and sneak around. And he got up and crept quietly away from this fireside towards the outer door. Hey there, cried Tom, glancing towards him with a most seeming look in his shining eyes. Hey, come, Frodo, there. Where be you a-goin'? Old Tom Bombadil's not as blind as that yet. Take off your golden ring, your hand's more fair without it, and come back. Leave your game and sit down beside me. He can see through the ring's invisibility. He doesn't turn invisible. He has literally no feelings about the ring. The ring that, like, basically seduces and also corrupts, like, everyone around him.
And he's just like, oh, what a fun silly trinket. Yeah.
A little fun trinket. And can see through it. It's like, hey, Tolkien, why'd you write this dude and then go ahead and die and not tell us anything about it?
Well, the other thing is, at this point, I'm like, the fact that, like, he doesn't come back. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe, I can't remember what you said.
I don't think he comes, if I'm remembering correctly, I don't think he comes back as a character. They mention him a couple times.
Okay. He seems like a great, all-knowing, all-powerful person to have on the team to Mount Doom. And it just seems like great untapped potential. And I guess the, I don't know, quote-unquote excuse for not having him is that it's like, he'd rather just stay in the forest.
Yeah.
This evil ancient ring, he doesn't care about it.
Yeah, I think that's kind of an interesting point that you make. Like, he's a very powerful person, but he doesn't want to, so he's not going to.
Yeah.
That's actually kind of a recurring theme in Lord of the Rings. Like, you hear a lot about the elves are fleeing, and the elves are immortal beings, very powerful magic, like very powerful armies. They could most likely stand up against Sauron again, because they already have once. but they're like choosing, they don't want to.
Yeah.
Like they're choosing to go. And so there's kind of, that's like a very, like, it's a thread that continues throughout the story of like these very powerful supreme beings being like, I can, but why should I? That doesn't sound fun.
Yeah.
It was a really interesting way to look at some of, at power and like the difference between like these meekest characters, little tiny babies, baby halfling game, are like going to make this very treacherous journey when there's all these creatures around them that like
probably could do it quicker, better. Yeah, they wouldn't get hurt.
So it's an interesting dichotomy, and it continues for a really long, like just throughout all 3 books.
Yeah, what I was kind of hoping would happen is that like every person they meet along the way, they're like, "Why don't you join us?" And they just like tack on another person to their like Mordor fighting party or whatever. And
the Mordor team.
Yeah, and that's not happening so far. So I'm hoping they introduce some more people soon. Which, I mean, I guess has to happen soon because I'm starting to plan ahead for the next couple episodes and chapters and stuff. And I'm like, oh wow, the end of the first half of this, the end of book 1, which is part 1 of Fellowship of the Ring. Not to be confused, like not to make it more confusing. Also, the fact that, like, Tolkien is like, these aren't 3 separate books. It's one long book.
Yeah, that's how it is, too, but then publish them as 3 separate books.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're just like, well, now hang on, bud.
Yeah. But yeah, we're not that far from what I hope more is going to happen in book 2, in the second part of this. They end the antics with the ring and their song and dance and tales and whatever.
Yeah, the rain. They can't keep using the rain as an excuse.
Yeah, and Tom
to hang out with their new friend.
I almost said the episode ends. So the chapter ends with Tom teaching them a song, which is essentially his version of Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice.
Because you literally say his name 3 times.
Yeah, his name is said 3 times, and you sing the song, and it's kind of like he doesn't specifically say like, oh, if you sing this song, I'll show up and help you. He just says, like, if you're ever in trouble, sing this song, and you'll feel better.
Or something. Never falters when it's singing.
Yeah,
is basically what he says.
Yeah. So that's how this chapter ends, and
he hands them all a little brown lunch bag, puts a kiss on all their heads,
and tucks them into bed,
and then just like pushes them out towards the bus stop.
Yeah. So normally this is where like I guess I would end for an episode, but chapter 8 is kind of short in the sense that like it's a lot, like not a lot happens over several pages, so this might be a longer episode, so hang in there, folks. And now we're gonna take an ad break. Just kidding, I don't have ads. Wouldn't that be amazing?
Blue Apron.
The most insane thing I think about ads now on podcasts is when true crime podcasts have ads, and it'll be like true crime podcasts need to figure out a better way to transition from like the storytelling into the ad, because it'll be like, and then they found her deceased body chopped and sliced into a trash bag. You know what else you can chop and slice? Carrots in your new package of Blue Apron, which is free with this. Yeah. And it's like, can you like at least like, I don't know.
And I love that every podcast is sponsored by Blue Apron.
Oh my gosh. No, a lot of them are HelloFresh. I think it's because originally I think Blue Apron was the only one, and then now there are so many other ones. There's one, I think there's one called like Dinnerly or something. I don't know. I know there's one called HelloFresh. But we're not sponsored.
Yeah, we're not sponsored.
All of those people just got me. All those people just got free free promotion. Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like this chapter can be summed up in one sentence. Tom Bombadil said, "Hey guys, don't go to the Barrow-Downs," and they
do. Yes. So yes, chapter 8, Fog on the Barrow-Downs.
I wonder where they're going.
Yeah, exactly. Which again, like I said, how the chapter is a complete spoiler for what happens, despite the fact that Tom like describes how awful and horrible it is there, and then he gives them like specific directions for how to avoid it and all this stuff.
Go through it, not over it.
Yeah, and then the chapter starts right off with they're leaving, and they pretty much left, and then Frodo goes, "Wait, I didn't say goodbye to Goldberry," and then they have to turn around so he can go say goodbye, or maybe I don't know if it's, I wasn't sure. They either turn around and go meet her, or she just, like, materializes.
She's there. Yeah.
And it's like,
he realizes that they didn't say goodbye to Goldberry because wherever she was, she just wasn't around. And so they all turn to go back, and then, like,
And then
behind
she's there.
them, she's
Yeah.
like, no, come this way.
Yeah.
And they turn around, and there she is on a hill, and they, like, sprint to her to be like, we love you, Mom.
Goodbye. Which is very weird if they have crushes on her.
Yeah,
Anyway.
I guess it is kind of weird.
Also, side note, Tom Bombadil and Goldberry kind of, I don't know why, but for whatever reason, give me the Secret Tunnel vibes from the band going, Secret Tunnel! Like, very Flower Child.
Yes.
Playing music.
Yeah.
This is an Avatar reference. Again, Avatar
We're
The
back
Last
to
Airbender.
back to this. Oh yeah, and then Goldberry, I feel like is when they talk about the Barrow-Downs, they're just kind of like, I don't remember how it ends, but something about the Barrow-Downs.
Yeah.
And then later they get there and they're like, I remember how the
And
Barrow dies.
that's how
And
this
dies.
That's how the Secret Tunnel song gets. Yeah, they're like, Secret
Yeah.
Tunnel.
I don't remember how it ends.
Yeah, I don't remember the next part, and then it goes,
Secret
Tunnel.
tunnel. Yeah.
That's
And I
it.
remember how that ended. And dies.
die.
Like, yeah. I feel like that's Mary or Pippin when they showed up to the Barrow-Downs, and they're like, I remember how this song ends.
So essentially,
Yeah, and there she
Everything
is. She's
can be-
clad in light as always, and always wearing yellow.
yellow, yes, and flowers, I think.
Always.
Always. So this is once again where Tolkien loses me with the excessive description of like directions and references to locations because there are multiple locations, and I'm like, I don't know where you are. He's
I
like,
know.
and due to the north was the Rivendell. Yeah. Oh, you know what? Here we go. So as they stood upon the knoll in the forest, which could now be seen rising pale and green out of the dark trees in the west. In that direction, the land rose in wooded ridges, green, yellow, russet under the sun, beyond which lay hidden the valley of Brandywine. To the south, over the line of the Withy Wendell, there was a distant glint of pale glass, where the Brandywine River made a great loop in the lowlands, and then he goes on to describe like what's north and what's east, and I'm like,
He
don't
explains
know.
all the cardinal directions. This book, I actually do believe, has a map.
Yeah, my book has a map, but it is not good. I'm like, I don't know where you are.
So yeah.
What did I say?
Don't
so
go to the Barrow-Downs.
Yeah, I wrote
They said,
previous
"But we will."
chapter. Tom told them to avoid the Barrow-Downs. Judging by the name of this chapter, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And then I wrote, so this chapter basically consists of them walking around. They're kind of following their directions. They're stopping to eat every now and then. Things are good. And then this is where things go wrong. Let me put it like this. Tom and Goldie did all they could to set the hobbits up for success. And the hobbits ruined it by accidentally falling asleep while lying in the grass and looking at the clouds.
Yep.
And that's what happens. They're like eating lunch, everything's good, it's sunny and warm, yay. They lie down in the grass and are looking at the clouds. And then it says they, like later on, awoke from a nap they never intended to take. And I was like, I mean, I've been there too.
Yeah, totally get
also.
that.
But not when I'm avoiding a very dangerous place and you're supposed to be out of there by, nightfall. And so basically this screws them over completely. And they wake up and everything.
Then the sun's basically setting.
Yeah, the sun's setting. It's cold and foggy now. Everything's dark. It's much more spookier. So they're following the path that they think, or the direction that they think is supposed to lead them out of there. And somehow they end up in the Barrow-Downs. Surprise. And Frodo is like, oh, I think I see the way. Come along, friends. And he speeds ahead, which you're never supposed to do. By the way, as someone who is like traveled with friends and I've been like leading some friends like down a street or whatever, I'm like, oh, it's this way. Come along. And then I start walking and then I turn around and I realize they are not following me.
Yes.
That's what happens here. Frodo is like, where are they? And then it's just a lot of frantic, all of the hobbits running around the forest calling out for each other.
Yeah.
And then it gets extra spooky.
It's kind of like one of those like monster chase Scooby-Doo moments.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's a foggy hall and they just like keep running in and out of doors and they can't find each other and go in one door and come out of another.
And the other thing that I'm not sure about is, do the whites like mimic their voices and try to like lead them in other directions or something? Because it says, or maybe not, I don't know. Maybe I just wanted that to be like...
No, I think it's another one of those like... It's left ambiguous because whoever the narrator is unreliable. But because there is that point where Sam, Merry Pippin, the ponies bolted into the mist and vanished. From some far For some way off, or so it seemed, he thought he heard a cry, "Hoy, Frodo, hoy." It was away eastward on his left that he stood against the great stones, staring and straining into the gloom.
Yeah.
And then as he keeps going, he keeps hearing voices, a thin voice out of the mist say, "Frodo, hoy," and then a cry that sounded like help, often repeated, ending with a last help that trailed off into a long wail, suddenly cut short. So yeah. I don't know if you're supposed to believe that it's Merry Pippin, or if the whites, the wraiths, are mimicking them, which is also I wonder too, did they fall asleep by some enchantment because they're near
that's what I was wondering at first, because
place.
In the Old Forest chapter they like suddenly get overcome with sleep and they fall asleep,
and then Old Man Willow tries to
and and then like Frodo gets lured away to the river and falls asleep, and one of the trees tries to drown him in the river. And so that's what I thought at first. I was like, oh, it's like another like weird sleeping enchantment spell.
Yeah.
And then
I wouldn't put it past this forest.
Yeah. I mean, it very easily could have been they laid down to look at the clouds and they fell asleep.
Snugly
or they laid down to look at the clouds and the forest were like, perfect. An opportunity.
Yeah.
Point being, they're all separated and bad things happen. Frodo all of a sudden comes face to face with one of these, what are they, Barrow-Wights?
Mm-hmm.
It says, trembling, he looked up in time to see a tall, dark figure like a shadow against the stars. It leaned over him. He thought there were two eyes, very cold, through lit... Wait. Oh my gosh, I can't read.
I know the text is very small too.
Trembling, he looked up in time to see a tall, dark figure like a shadow against the stars. It leaned over him. He thought there were two eyes, very cold, though lit with a pale light that seemed to come from some remote distance. Then a grip stronger and colder than iron seized him. The icy touch froze his bones, and he remembered no more.
Bum, bum, bum.
So then they Frodo, I got confused about all my people. Frodo wakes up and is like, okay, this is bad. Something's happening. This is bad. And I mean, I'm kind of confused about like what the end game was here for the whites. So first is this quote that I kind of liked. Because at first I was like, oh, what a fun, inspirational quote. And then it just kind of turned out to be funny.
Mm-hmm.
It says, there is a seed of courage hidden, often deeply, it is true, in the heart of the fattest and most timid hobbit, waiting for some final and desperate danger to make it grow. Frodo was neither very fat nor very timid. Indeed, though he did not know it, Bilbo and Gandalf had thought him the best hobbit in the Shire. Frodo's like, I gotta do something. I'm gonna be the hero. Yeah. And so I guess they're like under some kind of...
as if for a final spring and he no longer felt limp like a helpless prey.
Yeah, so I guess... So he wakes up and he's kind of like under this, I don't know, enchantment or curse or whatever. And I guess it's like, I don't know, maybe like sleep paralysis. Like you wake up and you're like, I'm awake, but my body isn't moving.
Yeah.
This is really freaky. Oh my gosh. Anyone see The Haunting on Hill House? The sleep paralysis and the bent neck lady?
Yes. Yes. An amazing, amazing show. I highly recommend it to anyone who hasn't seen it.
I'm going to pause this podcast now and go start a podcast about that.
Another podcast about that.
Oh, it's so good. Oh, man. If you haven't watched it and you decide to start watching it, look for ghosts in the background. It's very good. It's very good. But anyway, yeah.
Super spooky. It's not like terribly scary.
Yeah, the other thing is like I was like,
warning. It's not terribly scary, but it's like chilling.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be, it's mostly just like suspenseful and then a couple jump scares every now and then. Although I will say, the one that got me good was in, I guess I'll edit this part out because this is a big spoiler, is when... Oh my gosh, it was good. And then it takes like a hard left turn and it just gets really sad and haunting.
Yeah, really sad and haunting, but like a haunting of Hill House.
Yeah. So, highly recommend. Anyway, yeah, so they wake up and Frodo looks over and he sees Sam, Pippin, and Merry they're all like clothed in white and they have like chains or whatever, and it says something about a sword, and I don't know, they were on their backs and their faces looked deathly pale and they were clad in white. About them lay many treasures, of gold maybe, though in the light they looked cold and unlovely. On their heads were circlets, gold chains were about their waist, and on their fingers were many rings. Swords lay by their sides and shields were at their feet, but across their three necks lay one long naked sword. Which, I don't like the phrase naked sword,
Yeah.
but I get it.
Like unsheathed.
Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, I always assumed that the whites were doing some sort of ritual, some sort of like
so that's what I was. Is it like
feeding?
Yeah, are they going to eat them? Is it a sacrifice? Are they like? Do they? I guess they have to do some kind of like ceremony or ritual or whatever. Are they trying to turn them into whites?
Because like, so the thing is and I'm not really sure. There is a quote last chapter that I think ties into this nicely.
I know exactly what you're talking about because I think I read it, and as I read it out loud, I was like, "Oh, this is what it's talking about."
Yes, you did read it. The one that said sheep walked for a while biting grass, but soon the hills were empty again. A shadow came out of dark places far away, and the bones stirred in the mounds. It's the one with the broken teeth in the moonlight.
Oh, which
ties.
I want that to be a band name. Dibs.
I've always wondered, and it's never really explained, but I always wondered that, because when we talked about a shadow came out of dark places far away, Order is very far away. Mm-hmm. The shadow that they always keep talking about very vaguely, the enemy as being the shadowy force.
Enemy with a capital E.
And the ring wraiths as being like a similar kin to these whites. Because a barrow is just like an old English word for like a burial mound.
Yeah.
And then, so like at some point, these were just old burials of old people. And I think my theory is that when Sauron like came into being and came into power and started like calling these wraiths to them, he awoke them, but they weren't ever like fully aware of him. Does that make sense? So they're like enacting on people because like Sauron is tainted them, but not fully aware to be like, let's get the ring from Frodo and give it to Sauron. That's what I've always thought. Yeah.
So we don't have to find out what they were doing because then comes our dear friend Tom Bombadil. Frodo does the Beetlejuice summons and sings the song, and Tom Bombadil shows up and saves the day.
Yep. And gets rid of them.
Yes.
Well, sends them back to bed or whatever he does.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, yeah, they're like, where are our clothes? And he's like, forget about your clothes. They've been eaten now.
Yeah, those are gone.
Yeah, he's like, they're gone. I don't know what happened to them, but like, that should be the least of your concerns, I think. And then he tells them, he's like, I'll go find your horses and get you some clothes and robes or something. I don't know where he gets them. If there's a Target in the Old Forest, but
he rolls up to Fantasy Target.
Yeah.
And says, hey, I need some ropes.
Yeah. And he tells he's like, you are safe now. And tells them like, you could take off your clothes and lay a while in the grass. And that's what they do. And it just makes me laugh that the four hobbits take their clothes off and strip down.
Let it all hang out while they hang out.
And they all lie in the grass next to each other naked. True broship.
Yeah.
True broship.
I want to say gay, but also like they're all cousins.
They're all related. They're all bros. Four bros are chilling in the grass. 5 feet apart because they're not gay.
But still naked.
but very naked.
This is like a separate piece when they went to the beach.
Oh no, don't get me started. No. I don't want to ruin a separate piece for you because I know it's one of your favorites. And so it was the other day Neil and I were talking, I'd say the other day, I think it was like this morning maybe.
Yeah,
we were talking about how after you get out of school, there are a lot of books that you're like, oh wait, this is actually good, or like this is enjoyable, or I want to read this again. And I was saying how
proof that we're both out of college for the most part, and now we're deciding to close read a book and then make a podcast about it.
Like, yeah, exactly.
And then talk about it.
And I said that I cannot recall a single book from any of my English high school classes that I mean, the ones that I liked were, let's see, there was Night, Anthem, and Great Gatsby are the ones that I remember being like, yeah, that was good. And then all the other ones I remember either not reading or finishing. Looking at you, Canterbury Tales. Thank you. By the way, shout out to Sarah Murphy. If she happens to be listening, I copied all of your Canterbury Tales notes. Because it was during Tech Week for Little Shop that we were reading it, and we had to do all these really detailed like notes for homework. And I was like, I don't have time for this, and Sarah was like, I'll do it. And I was like, thank you. So anyway, but yeah, the separate piece I remember being very angered by. It was one of those books where I was like, this is both pointless and makes me angry. No, a separate piece spoilers here.
Yeah.
For a book that was written 60 years ago or something.
I already made fun of you for saying
yeah.
no Lord. Like 2 episodes or 3 episodes ago, you and your friend are talking about what's the statute of limitations on spoilers?
Yeah.
And this book is almost 70 years
and I'm
old,
saying no spoilers.
and I'm not allowed to like say anything about the end.
No spoilers, please. Well, I think it's I think if someone specifically requests you, hey, can you not spoil that? Then you should be a pal and not do that. So, like, for example, if you and your friends are talking about Lost and someone comes up and is like, oh, you're talking about Lost? I just started it.
And then someone goes, oh, did you know that the island is blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. And then,
avoiding Lost spoilers here on that's what I'm talking about.
Even though Lost ended, 10, 12 years ago.
I don't know.
You can still be a pal and just don't be a jerk. You just don't need to be that person.
I mean, we're closer to 2030 than we are to 9/11.
Someone was like, was anyone going to tell me? Oh, it's that meme
so was anyone going to tell me?
Or was I supposed to? And it was like, was anyone supposed to tell me that we're 4 months away from the end of the 2010s? Yeah. Or was I just supposed to keep track of the passage of time myself?
We're about to enter a whole new decade. And then the 20s will have been literally 100 years ago. I know. And we'll be in the 20s again.
Have you heard the joke that people are like, oh, I'm so excited we're about to enter the roaring 20s again, but like now it has a different context where it's just like the screaming 20s where everyone's just screaming and yelling. So yes, Tom Bombadil comes back somehow with clothes. We don't know from where.
Yeah, and Fatty Lumpkin.
That's right, Fatty Lumpkin, the horse. And 4 other horses. And
he named them all.
And Tom like roasts the hobbits for being like, you should have listened to your horses. If the horses were acting freaked out, they know. Like, the horses know which direction is good and which direction is bad. And it does... going back to, like, when they accidentally fell asleep and then they woke up. Mm-hmm. Before they fall asleep, it makes a note that, like, the horses are, like, grazing peacefully by the grass and blah. And then when they wake up, the horses are all bunched together with their heads bowed down. Yeah, so Tom is like, you should have listened. In the future, just pay attention to what the horses are doing because they know what's happening. And then my last note, so Tom walks them out of the forest and is like, if you go down this way, you'll get to the bar, the Prancing Pony, which I cannot believe is the name of the bar. It sounds like the name of the bar that would be in like Shrek or something. Because I know in Shrek 2, the villain bar is the Poison Apple or something.
Yeah, I think it is. Or like the Red Apple or something like that.
I can't remember off the top. I can't memorize what my own social security number is, but I can tell you what the name of the villain bar in Shrek 2 is.
Listen. This comes from the same man who created a name for like everything and then named his mountain Mount Doom. Which, before anyone tears into me about how the mountain's name is not actually Mount Doom, trust me, I know. Okay, I know. I know it's all of its names. Relax. Like Legolas Greenleaf. His first name means Greenleaf, so his name is Greenleaf.
Oh, it's like Remus Lupin, Wolfie McWolf. Or no, his like father was like Mr. Wolf McWolf. Yeah, and then they named him Remus. And it was like, Wolfie you are the son of Wolfie McWerewolf Wolf.
Yeah, or Sirius Black just means black dog.
Yeah, so Tom is like, go that way, you'll get to the Prancing Pony, which I can't believe is the name of a bar, and I can't believe is the name of the following chapter.
At the sign of the Prancing Pony.
Yes, that. Oh no, I just flipped to a random page, and there's a long poem.
There's a lot of poems.
Oh, and there's an asterisk. It says, see note 2. Where was note 1?
Yeah, oh, man, and when they get to the elves, there's even more songs and poems.
I've heard.
So,
which disappoints me because I want to like the elves because I I think they're like the cool kids, and I want to think they're cool. So I hope they don't sing too much. I'm sure they will. Question: should I be reading the songs? Like, if let's just say, for example, if I happen to skim all of the songs,
you're not gonna lose much.
Because I get to the songs and I'm like, I just can't follow this without there being like a tune.
A rhythm.
Yeah, a rhythm or something, yeah.
No, I get that. You're not really gonna miss, especially in that chapter, it's just a lot of, like, more information dumps, but this time it's in poem form.
Oh.
So, like, but it's not like, here's the plot.
Yeah.
You know, it's like background stuff.
Okay.
The one that I really love, though, is when I'm going to read it, is when Bombadil comes back with the horses, and he says, "Hey now, come ho now, whither do you wander? Up, down, near or far, here, there, or yonder. Sharp ears, wise nose, swish tail, and bumpkin. White socks, my little lad, and old fatty lumpkin." This man named one of the horses Bumpkin so he could 100% rhyme it with fatty lumpkin.
Yeah.
And I don't mean Tolkien, I mean Tom Bombadil made that choice to name one of their horses Bumpkin.
Just that one reminded me of Puck from A Midsummer Night's Dream.
Yeah, he's got a very fairy, like King of the Fairies quality.
And like Puck is very mischievous and also
I would say he's definitely got a very like Puck Oberon feel to him, and Goldberry's definitely got a Titania.
Yeah, Titania. Yeah. I should know. I was in that play.
I should know. I've read it a lot, but like I don't. Who can keep all these things together?
So the first
Tom's like, is a little bit more exciting than the second one.
And then and then Tom leaves them and is like, "Alas, I cannot come with you." And they're like, "Please," and he's like, "No,
nope, sorry.
I'm gonna go home.
Tom has a house.
My fairy goddess river woman is waiting. Bye." Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
he sends them on their way.
Yeah, so
they're a little nervous because like when they were in the forest, it meant that the Black Riders couldn't follow them, but now they're out of the forest, so the Black Riders can keep following them. So it's sort of like a
Frodo,
which evils.
I feel like Frodo tries to throw in the excuse of like, yeah, this might have taken us way longer than we planned. And sure, we might have almost gotten killed or sacrificed by these whites, but it probably threw the Black Riders off our trail.
So, small victories, guys, small victories.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, Frodo, you weren't the one who was like put under their spell, though.
Yeah.
We had to wear those rings and the knife on our neck.
Ugh.
But also in that chapter, I meant to bring it up, but I had completely forgotten it. Right after, it's in the moment, he hears that creepy song that the white is singing.
Yeah.
And then he has that moment. It says, "At first, Frodo felt as if he had indeed been turned into stone by the incantation. Then a wild thought of escape came to him. He wondered if he put on the ring, whether the Barrow Wight would miss him and he might find some way out. He thought of himself running free over the grass, grieving for Merry and Sam and Pippin, but free and alive himself.
Yeah.
And Gandalf would admit that there had been nothing else he could do." That's such a, like, Frodo's praised a lot by a lot of readers and a lot of like critics as like having this strong, indomitable will. But that's a moment I feel where like the ring was calling to him. And he very much was like, I could just slip this little thing on. And even Gandalf would say, well,
can't blame you. You're about to die, so...
It's a dark moment for Frodo. And I think that it opens a door a bit for some darkness in Frodo's heart that pay attention to as you
I was going to say, I know a couple spoilers, and one of them is that at some point Frodo becomes under the power of the ring or puts it on or is corrupted or whatever.
Sure.
No comment.
I'm sure you did hear that at one point.
So that brings us to the end of chapter 7 and 8. Thanks for hanging in there with us. Thank you for coming, Neal, and talking about all of this.
This was a lot of fun. Really enjoyed this.
Where can people find you on the internet if you want them to find you on the internet?
You can find me on the interwebs at, I actually really only have an Instagram, at Neal, Neal, _before_God.
Humble.
Very humble.
Subtle.
Very humble. Really, really humble individual.
That's What I'm Talking About is a production of Bacon and Eggs. If you want to learn more, you can go to baconandeggs.media. You can find me on Twitter at MCWatt416. You can find me on Instagram at MCTurnedDownForWatt. You can find the podcast on Twitter and Instagram at TolkienAboutPod. The cover art is by Graphite/Vaishon Brandon. Thank you, Vaishon. It's very beautiful. You can support him on Instagram. Yeah, it's great. I love it a lot. You can find him on Instagram at graphite.vmb. And I think that's it. Second time's the charm. Listeners, you don't know, but I tried that once before.
I will say for my final thoughts, it's pronounced Tolkien, and they can tell me all they want that it's pronounced Tolkien, but like, it's pronounced Tolkien.
That's what I'm talking about.